Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to this third teaching video on the third Karmapa, Rangjung Dorje's Mahamudra prayer. As you saw in the previous two videos, we are studying this prayer, and we're studying it through the commentary of the very great 8th Taisitupa. One thing that Tibetans did excellently, and that we don't seem to find in the Indian Buddhism that gave rise to Tibetan Buddhism, is a way of structuring texts, or rather of analyzing texts according to their structure. So looking back on the major Indian Buddhist works, Tibetan scholars tend to analyze them. These first verses are about this, and then this is about that. So we can see the underlying thinking behind what is usually poetry. Beautifully written, succinct verses that speak with their own voice, but then the Tibetan analysis helps us to see into the mind of the author and the structure and the thinking that's going on. So in this case, it's not being done with an Indian Mahamudra work, but with the work of the third Karmapa by the 8th Taisitupa Chögyal Dzongni. Last time we looked at the first verse, and the first verse stands on its own. It's sort of what we must say, what we must do before we even start doing any praying to do with Mahamudra. It's a very, very general setting in place. And so you'll remember we prayed to the lamas and the yidams and the deities of the mandala, because we need in our minds and in our hearts to connect with them. It's what it's all about. Connection, opening up, tuning in. So that must be set in place first. And then verses 2 through to 24 are the main teaching body of the prayer, where the teachings come verse by verse, expressed as wishes. But then those wishes become incredibly precise and detailed. So we can go through the verses, and each verse will tell us its own story. Each verse will be very memorable. It's beautifully written. Once we learn it by heart, it's a wonderful Mahamudra reference library. But at the same time, as we go through the 25 verses, it is definitely a journey of Mahamudra teachings, showing us what we need in each verse, and also through that, helping us understand what we maybe haven't acquired yet and what we will need to put in place or to get rid of from our practice. In the main body of the prayer, which is verses 2 to 24, then that is done in two big sections. But in fact, the first big section is just one verse. It's the verse we'll do today. And that's a prayer for the general conditions of Mahamudra to be in place. Then after that, verses 3 through to 24 will be about the details, and they'll be presented in 5 sections, some of which are just one verse, and some of which are many, many verses with substructures and substructures, mainly about the actual practice of Mahamudra. So for instance, we have one verse about shamatha. It gives us the general analogy, an ocean, and an ocean where you have the water and you have the waves. And then we get some instruction in the form of a wish of how we should handle this ocean of a mind which is still. So there's just one of the 25 verses is about that, but it really touches the heart. And through the structure, we can see how shamatha practice is introduced at that point, because it fits into the overall journey of Mahamudra, which is much, much more than shamatha. So today's verse is the general introduction, the general wish to set in place the right conditions. Then after that, well, maybe in the next talk, we will look at the remaining 5 key areas of instruction. So today is another general verse. I'm putting online some PDFs which will show you this general overall structure, verse by verse, so you're at ease with that. You don't have to follow the words as we go through all of these talks. And also, of course, I need to put online, and you'll find with this video, a link to a translation of this prayer. Of course, it's our translation. There are other translations, and it's up to you to use the one you find works best for you. But I'll be explaining it through our terminology and the understanding that we acquired. Now, let's look at this verse. Springing from the snow mountain of all the pure intentions and actions of myself and limitless beings are the rivers of accumulated virtue, unpolluted by triplicity. May they flow into the ocean of the victor's 4 kayas. Now, this one verse could unpack into so many teachings. And I'm going to do what the Taisittupa, our present Taisittupa, did when he was teaching this prayer in Washington, and that is to keep it simple. Let's keep it as a simple start for everything to be right. And he gives us this example of streams of incredibly pure water coming from the highest mountains. Right? Now, I'd like to take advantage of this to do something that the Karmapa will mention in one of the verses to come, which is about how we understand. We must understand, and understanding is a process which goes on and on and on. It gets deeper and deeper and deeper, although sometimes, click, you get an insight, you go deeper into a topic. It will never end until you're enlightened. And the difference between those Dharma students who really do mature, shed what needs to be shed, grow and blossom as human beings, the difference between those and those who don't is an ability to contemplate, to take a few words or one idea, or in this case one verse, and to take it away and to stay with it, to dig into it, to savor it, and think, if the third Karmapa were here right now, what would he want me to understand? And there's understanding in terms of just getting it intellectually, but what happens is things impact us deeper and deeper, and it becomes so true. We need to learn how to think, how to contemplate. So in this case, we stop. And what's the Karmapa talking about? Streams from the top of the highest mountains. So maybe go to a high mountain, sit next to the purest stream, drink its water. And if you can't do that in reality, and if you can't do that several times in reality, at least in our imagination, we think, what is being conveyed here? So if, like Tibetans, you have been to places where the water is totally uncontaminated. No animals are living in it yet. No animals are defecating in it. No pollution is coming in from everywhere. And that can be seen because when you go to those rare places where the oxygen is hard to breathe because you're so high, and there you've seen the snow coming down, space is given these white flakes, totally pure, and they settle. And then, when the time comes, that melts, and the first stream is the purest of water, the most delicious of water. Nothing wrong with it. And if you've been all over the world tasting water in many countries like I have, then you'll know when you come across that water coming from a spring or from the highest of mountains, and you taste it, and that, gosh, this is so pure. So let's take his analogy. What is pure? What is it that's so high, that is so uncontaminated? And he's talking about the intention. This verse is about intention. His own intention, because he knows that, and his intention, which is the same as his guru's intention. Or Jempa, and then his gurus, because those masters embodied a totally pure mind. When we have the fortune to meet a true guru, then the mind we meet is nothing but purity. You can't find the hard edges, the difficulty, the own agenda, the egotism. Nothing but love and compassion and service and an access to endless, profound wisdom. That is what a master should be. That is why true gurus who hold the lineage are so rare. That's why in the previous verse we prayed our hearts out to connect up with them. So now the Karmapa is telling us that behind the Mahamudra transmission over the ages, through the Yidam practices and so on, there has been 100% pure motivation from its teachers to benefit us all. Now when we come to analyze motivation, we come to various commitments of Buddhism. The basic commitments to never harm and to live a good ethical life, and to care for each other, to respect life, to be honest and so on. Noble in our conduct. There's the whole Shravaka basis of morality, and then mastering the mind, and then the wisdom of no self, that we are committed to making our reality. Then on top of that, we have the Bodhisattvas, amazing, loving commitment to each and every being, where the Bodhisattva no longer feels like me and them. We know we're part of everyone, and it's everyone's well-being, which all of this is about. One is committed to that. Through aspiration bodhicitta, we are committed to learning about our humanity and dedicating our lives to be true human beings. Through aspiration bodhicitta, through practice bodhicitta, we are actually committing our lives to living like a full and true human being. And then when that's in place, so the Shravaka teachings of right conduct and shamatha and no self-wisdom become the basis for the Bodhisattva's loving care for all beings and twofold objective to take one's own mind to its fullness, total fulfillment, and through that to bring others, as many as possible, to their total fulfillment. That becomes the basis for Vajrayana or Mahamudra, where we have the profound bond with our own Mahamudra gurus and lineage, as we saw last time, through the Yidam practices. So all of that in the lineage up to the third Karmapa was such a pure intention, like the purest water in that highest place on the world, those mountaintops where these streams came from. That's as high as it gets. On land we can't go any higher into space. We go up the mountains, we find the purest stream. So in the heights of purest thought and purest meditation, this beautiful intention to benefit through the Mahamudra teachings is there in the third Karmapa, in his gurus, and he is praying that that be there as the basis for all that we'll pray for in the coming verses. So we have motivation, action, and result. Result, fruition, consequences, outcome, whatever you like to call it. The pure motivation is that of the third Karmapa and all of our lineage masters. We take it as our own, achieve Mahamudra to benefit all beings. And then with that motivation, there will be all of these rivers of action compared to rivers that flow one into the other, becoming bigger and bigger. So then there will be all of our good bodhisattva actions. And then the outcome will be the 4 kayas. Our present Taisitupa, explaining this verse, underlined the importance of the bodhisattva motivation, the bodhisattva mind. You see, Mahamudra belongs to Vajrayana, Tantra. It's the heart of it. It's the highest of it. And he says there can be no Vajrayana without Mahayana, without the kind, loving heart of the bodhisattva that at the same time knows everything is devoid of own nature. That quiet, beautiful, transparent wisdom of the bodhisattva expressed as love is the whole basis for any Mahamudra practice. If it's there, Mahamudra can work. If it's not there, Mahamudra can't work. So we can say it's that simple. So this water of pure intentions that brings Mahamudra into our life with the Guru's presence and with meeting up with these teachings, he's saying, may that water flow, and as water flows down the mountainside and becomes a mountainside and becomes a big river and eventually goes into the sea, he's saying, may what starts out as our beginning to learn Mahamudra end up as the ocean of the 4 kayas. Kaya is a Sanskrit word. It means embodiment, presence. And we use it to denote the way that the Buddha is experienced. It's how we describe what a Buddha is. And in particular, in the Buddha nature teachings from Maitreya, we have very profound explanation of the kayas. The 4 kayas tell us how a Buddha is, in absolute terms, what a Buddha is, but also what a Buddha is in terms of how the Buddha mind, the pure mind, the Mahamudra mind, is experienced by others. Because that's also part of what becoming a Buddha means. So Dhammakaya is Buddha as only Buddhas will really know. Buddha is what it's like if you were a Buddha. It's what being a Buddha is from your point of view. And no one else will get that except other Buddhas. It's beyond form, has no shape, colour. It isn't a something somewhere. That's so profound. And that's the real Buddha. That's purity, which we define as the perfect, inseparable blend of wisdom, loving compassion, and power to help other beings. Is experienced by others, even though it has no form, it has no place, there's no way we can pin it down. That's why we say it's shunyata, it's voidness. It's experienced by others as Buddhas and Pure Lands, and someone there teaching me here. Buddha Amitabha teaching me here. Or Vasharvarahi Doji Palmo teaching me here. As long as there is duality, then there is somebody practicing, there's a meditator, and there's meditation experience. So even though that's part of our illusion, it's part of the journey of unwinding illusions from thick, painful, harmful illusions to lighter, easier to deal with illusions of the Bodhisattva path. So slowly, 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 through this experience of you, the meditator, going through the stages of meditation, you will go beyond you and an experience, and that will be, in the end, Mahamudra. So Dhammakaya is Buddha as Buddhas know Buddha. Sambhogakaya is Buddha as very great bodhisattvas. Pure minds, but not quite 100% finished pure, but very pure minds we call great bodhisattvas. How they experience this timeless, formless, perfect mind of love, wisdom and power. And they see it with form, they hear it teaching sound, so it comes through the senses, but in a very pure way that we call Pure Lands. Very pure meditation experiences, and that is the Sambhogakaya. And then for those who aren't great bodhisattvas, the likes of me and you, most of us, ordinary human beings, we can still experience that timeless, perfect purity coming through our human bodhisattva teachers. So that level of the same thing, and the same pure Buddha mind, but expressing itself through someone we can see and hear and go and talk with in our human world, we call that Nirmanakaya. Sambhogakaya, experienced by bodhisattvas. Nirmanakaya, experienced by sentient beings in the worlds of suffering. Worlds of expressions of the Buddha in form, as a teacher, as a guide, as a refuge. And then Dhammakaya, the real Buddha that only Buddhas know. So then we've got one more to go. It's called Svabhavikakaya. And that is the way in these teachings we hit the point that these three kayas are not three separate things in three separate places, like Buddha having three realities going on at the same time. They're inseparable. That inseparability, the one essence, is Svabhavikakaya, because Svabhavika means the very essence of all that. So whatever Buddha is, Buddhas experience it one way, very pure minds another way, not so pure minds another way, but it's the same thing, and it's in terms of who's experiencing it. So that's the great ocean of the four kayas. When you become Buddha, that's what you'll become. You'll become a teaching presence for ordinary beings, a teaching presence for great bodhisattvas, and then what exactly it is you've become will be Mahamudra. So the prayer, this general prayer, is for that to happen. But how will it happen? And now the key point here brings us straight away to the key point of all of the Mahamudra practice. There'll be all those levels of pure intention. Basic Buddhism, Mahayana, Vajrayana Samaya. But more than anything, what Mahamudra will set in place is a practice and a development of wisdom that takes us beyond what we usually call duality. But in this particular verse, we refer to as triplicity, or there's three spheres of action. It's the way things normally seem to us. Normally there's you, and then there's everybody else and the whole infinite expanse of life. And you interact with all of that life. So there's subject and object and interaction. Subject, object, interaction. And in our minds, in our unenlightened minds, these seem very different. Moment after moment, you feel like you don't feel like other people. If you're looking at a tree or a mountain, the tree's out there, seemingly, and you're you. And then the interaction is very specific. We have loving relationships with these, difficult relationships with those. The interaction is its own story, the story of karma. So these, at the beginning, feel very real in their own right. But they're not. They depend entirely on each other. The world seems to me to be how it is because of the way I am, and the way I'm conditioned, and the way I'm projecting onto it, and all of my history and assumptions. Can't separate those two. And that determines the interaction that I'll have with the world. So anyway, that's the topic of many, many verses to come, and Mahamudra practice itself. It's not for me to sort out with you just now in a few seconds. Let's give it a few years of practice, maybe. But the point is, the pure motivation behind the Mahamudra lineage that's being given to you through the teachings and the practice is primarily a non-dual or a non-triplistic motivation. The third Karmapa had that. The third Karmapa knew exactly what that was. So pure, because it is the natural state, like the natural snow and water falling from the sky. So this knowledge that duality is an illusion, it's not like that. And that this absence of subject-object interaction is the truth of reality. That secret of existence that the Karmapa will call in a later verse, the secret, is behind this whole transmission. So the Karmapa is praying that through us, learning properly what voidness means in terms of transcending these three areas of illusion, then he is praying that we can take whatever instruction, whatever wisdom is given to us, and use that non-dual, non-triplicity wisdom to make Buddhas of ourselves, so that we become useful to everyone through the Sambhogakaya and the Nirmanakaya, and that we fulfill to the utmost our own potential. This mind of yours is so beautiful, so pure, so wise, so strong inside. If only you can find it. That's his wish. I hope it's our wish too. So setting in place the general conditions. Let me read you the Tibetan to conclude this talk. Da dan tai semchen tamche ji, samjo namdak, kangri lejepe, kosum nyokme, getsok, chujun nam, jalwa kushi jamso, jujurchi. Practice well. We need to practice. Reflect well. Take yourself in reality or in your mind up the highest, most wonderful mountain. Sit next to that stream. Drink it. And then think. Think back through time to the third Jawa Karmapa and the wonders that he inherited from his teachers, and how he wishes to share those treasures with us, and will wish in the future to share those treasures with many, many others. Practice well, contemplate well, and speak soon. Practice well, contemplate well, and speak soon.